coming together to change the way we support caregiving families has the potential to not only change our lives, but to bring us together as a country in a way that is desperately needed. Langston Hughes once said, "When someone cares for you and cries for you, they can straighten out your soul." What if investing in care is just what we needed to strengthen the soul of the country? No better place to start than right here in Hawaii, and I cannot wait to see the state lead the way.
Aloha mai kako. I'm Laura Lyons. I'm very pleased to serve as the Vice Provost for Academic Excellence here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. On behalf of the university and Provost Michael Bruno, I want to thank you all for coming and joining us here this evening. Tonight's topic is one that touches all of us. It's about how we care for each other, how we care for our newborns, our kids, our aging parents, grandparents, all of our loved ones. Over the course of a lifetime, just about all of us will face a crisis around care. So for me, I can tell you that caring for people is so indelibly etched in my memory that I can tell you that 24 years ago tonight, I was in a hospital in Fargo, North Dakota, with a father who had stage 4 lung cancer that had metastasized to his brain, while my sister was across the city in an apartment with my mother who had dementia and who was very intent when he was at home on lighting cigarettes next to the oxygen tank. I say this not to elicit sympathy for me, but because we all have these stories and they are all etched in our memories. The trouble is that in the US, we have little support to help us through the crises that inevitably materialize over a lifetime. Too often, we are left on our own. Ai-jen Poo imagines that it doesn't have to be that way. Our speaker tonight has dedicated her entire life to making it different, to ensuring that all of us have access to care and that caregiving jobs are decent jobs. One of the things I find most inspiring about her is the way that she is able to connect people's lived experiences to structural problems and solutions that improve lives. And the way that, for her, issues that seem to others disparate, like immigration and caregiving, are actually intimately connected. Just as support networks make for better care, a large group of individuals and organizations work to bring our speaker here tonight and back to Hawaii. I will say in my office, as I told her, she is known as the person who gave the very best commencement address ever. So I want to thank the Better Tomorrow Speakers Series, who, as a joint venture with Hawaii Community Foundation and Kamehameha Schools, brings together the speaker series, which aims to organize conversations that help us think about how to meet the most challenging needs and issues that we face, from housing to climate change to caregiving. This event is also sponsored by the Hawaii Children's Action Network, UH's College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, the Kaimana Beach Hotel, Unbound Philanthropy, and the Learning Coalition. To introduce our speaker this evening, I'd like to welcome to the stage the Senior Vice President and Chief Impact Officer for one of our partners, the Hawaii Community Foundation. Like our speaker, Michelle Ka'uhane is an impressive and passionate force for good. She sits on the White House Commission on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. For several years, she ran the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, and she is a new trustee at Kamehameha Schools. Please welcome Michelle Ka'uhane.
Thank you. Aloha. My job this evening is really simple, and that is really to introduce our guest speaker. And I know many of you know Ai-jen from her time here in Hawaii earlier, a few years back, and she was also a commencement speaker here at UH with an impressive resume. But who I want to introduce tonight is the woman that I got to know over the last 2 years. So what you don't know about her resume, and I think what makes Ai-jen such a perfect speaker and a perfect woman to address us this evening, is that Ai-jen has a legacy of a lifetime. Her legacy in life, her life's work, is aligned with values that we care about here in Hawaii. She is grounded in the care of our keiki to our kupuna. She's a gentle voice, a kind and compassionate woman, and really a force to be reckoned with. So it's really an honor and a pleasure to welcome our friend and really one of the colleagues at the White House Commission, Ai-jen Poo.
Good evening. This is my first time back to the Aloha State in many years, since before the pandemic, and it really does feel like a homecoming. The care movement has deep, deep roots here, and you all have always treated me like family. So it's just an honor to be back and an honor to be a part of this Better Tomorrow speaker series. And I just want to thank our sponsors, the Hawaii Community Foundation, Kamehameha Schools, and the University of Hawaii at Manoa, especially Robert Perkinson. Where are you, Robert? Thank you for organizing all of the meetings and all of the events around this trip. And special thanks and recognition to the organizations on the ground here in Hawaii who are doing the work to move the care agenda forward here. I want to recognize Hawaii Children's Action Network. Where are you? Amazing. Appleseed. And the Hawaii Worker Center. And I'm going to actually begin tonight's talk by turning to all of you. I'm going to ask that we spend a couple of minutes where you turn to the person sitting next to you and share a story about someone in your life who you've cared for or who has cared for you, and the significance of that relationship in your life. And we're just going to take 5 minutes to exchange stories, to bring our own care stories into the room. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I love starting that way because everyone has a care story, and every room that I'm in comes alive in that same way. And it's just so powerful every time. So thank you for sharing your stories. And I just want to see if any of you in this room are either family caregivers or professional caregivers. If you could just raise your hand. All right, let's give them a round of applause. November is National Caregivers Month, and it's a time when we want to lift up and honor our caregivers, but really that should be every month. But thank you to the caregivers in the room for everything you do, because you make everything in society possible. And that is what we're going to talk about tonight. For those of you who don't know me as well, I'm Chinese American, raised in an intergenerational immigrant family. My grandparents played a really strong role in raising me. I grew up watching my grandfather do Tai Chi in the driveway in the mornings and learning from his discipline. And then in the evenings, we watched his favorite TV show together, Wheel of Fortune, where he turned his focus towards guessing the words before the contestants, and he often did, very impressive. But in so many ways, he was a hero to me. And as he aged, it meant that I was a part of that journey and learned a lot about caregiving through his experience. After my grandfather turned 90, his vision very quickly started to deteriorate, which then led to a really rapid decline in his overall health. And my father couldn't find appropriate care for him in the home, and we ended up having to place him in a nursing home against his wishes. It was the one thing that he did not want. And I will never forget the memory of visiting him there. He shared a room with 5 or 6 other people, I can't remember, but it was a number of people, and the food was unrecognizable. The fluorescent lights didn't work, they kind of flickered. The direct care workers who worked in the facility were completely overwhelmed. They were responsible for between 20 and 30 people each. My grandfather became unrecognizable in his own way when I saw him there. He was just a shell of the person that he was, and passed away after just a few months in the facility. And while all this was happening, my work life was also unfolding in the world of care. This year marks my 25th year organizing with domestic workers and caregivers. And for context, domestic workers are the workers who work inside of our homes, providing caregiving and cleaning services as nannies, as home care workers, as house cleaners. And it's the work that makes it possible for so many working parents and family caregivers to go out into the world and work every day. It supports the development of young children in their care, or a dignified quality of life for older people and people with disabilities. So essential, and yet so undervalued. Some of the most undervalued and insecure work in our entire economy. Average wages are less than $12 an hour. There's no health insurance, no job security, no paid time off. 82% of domestic workers didn't have a single paid sick day going into the pandemic. So 25 years ago, I started by sitting on park benches in the playgrounds in Manhattan, listening to the stories of nannies. I would ride the commuter rails from Manhattan to Long Island and back, and I just would listen, sit next to them and listen. And what I learned through listening is that the work is very challenging, but it's also incredibly meaningful. Seeing the pride in the work, the intimate relationships they have with the children in their care, or the older adults that they take care of, the children who won't let go of the nanny's hands in the playgrounds, the funerals where the person crying the hardest is the home care worker sitting in the front row. These relationships are so powerful. And domestic workers are overwhelmingly women, and majority women of color. 1/3 immigrant. It's actually the workforce in our economy that has the largest concentration of undocumented immigrants of any workforce. The majority of domestic workers are also mothers themselves. So in addition to caring for others, they also have their own families they care for. In the first 8 years of our organizing, we focused on organizing the workers and getting them to join the organization, to know that they're not alone, that we had the ability to come together and to break out of the isolation of the work and to find voice and power together. And we decided that we were going to try to change the laws in New York to establish rights and protections and end the exclusions of domestic workers from basic labor laws, exclusions that are deeply rooted in our country's legacy of slavery and anti-Black racism. It didn't take long in that work for me to realize, though, that the low wages and lack of recognition for care workers like domestic workers, and the lack of choices that we had for my grandfather were related, connected. Manifestations of the same much bigger problem, which is that we don't value care in America. In Hawaii, there is a culture of care and valuing care. But the country as a whole, care is largely invisible and taken for granted. unsupported. And we therefore haven't invested in the kinds of policies, systems, or workforce that would support us to care for the people we love, from childcare to paid family and medical leave to aging and disability care. What we have instead is 53 million overstretched family caregivers and parents, and shockingly underpaid professional care workers. Or in the words of social scientist Jessica Calarco, other countries have a social safety net, the US has women. Meanwhile, a quiet crisis has been brewing. The baby boom generation is aging into retirement at a rate of 10,000 people turning 65 per day, and we're living longer than ever before, thanks to advances in healthcare and technology. Before the pandemic, waiting lists for people to receive home and community-based care started to balloon to over 800,000 people waiting, some of whom had been waiting for years, almost a decade. Rates of turnover for home care workers continue to rise as the wages failed to rise. The median annual wage for a home care worker is $23,000 per year. So with the dramatic increase in the need for aging and disability care on the part of a growing older population, my friend Sarita Gupta and I decided to take it as an opportunity to address the simmering crisis and proactively build solutions that we need for this new era of care. And in 2011, we launched Caring Across Generations to bring all of us together to change the way that we value and support caregiving in our country. So for the decade that followed, we worked in states, including Hawaii, with stakeholders like many of you in this room to try to make change. Our big agenda included 4 key pillars, and still does. The first is access to quality, affordable childcare. Yes. Yes. The second is affordable, quality, aging and disability care, especially in the home and community where most of us would like to stay. The third is good union jobs with family-sustaining wages and benefits for care workers. And the fourth is paid family and medical leave so that we can take time away from work when we need to heal from an injury or care for loved ones who are ill or spend time with a newborn without having to worry about losing our income. So here we were able to pass the Kapuna caregiving program. Yes. It was the country's first ever benefit to support working family caregivers who are caring for their loved ones at home. And we found groups who were trying to innovate and build solutions in pockets around the country. But progress was very slow and incremental in most of the country. We faced 2 major obstacles. The first is deeply rooted in our culture as a society. We treat caregiving as a personal responsibility, something to be shouldered by individuals and families on our own. And if we somehow struggle to afford care or manage it or find it, we feel like it's a personal failure, like we didn't have the right job or we didn't buy long-term care insurance when we were supposed to. We see it as a crisis of personal failures, not a system failure. But caregiving is one of the most important roles we have in life. And we are all doing the very best we can. And it was never meant to be shouldered alone. And it certainly can't be at a time when 70% of children are growing up in households where all the adults in the household have to work outside of the home to make ends meet. No system will ever replace our role as caregivers for the people we love. A good system will, however, support that role, invest in it, enable us to show up for the people we love. Care is both an individual and a societal responsibility and a community responsibility. The main failure today is not an individual one. It's that what little systems there are broken. The second big obstacle we faced is the siloing and the zero-sum dynamic that has defined our policies in this period. All of our programs are underfunded, and it feels like a Hunger Games every budget season, where we're constantly told that there's no money, care is too expensive, and we're pitted against each other based on the cost of care, the needs of children versus the needs of older people, the needs of workers versus the needs of families or consumers who rely on care. But this seems like a false choice, because in the end, how do we offer care for working parents or caregivers without care workers to support us? Older people and children are part of the same multi-generational families. How could we pit generations against one another? As a multi-generational society, we're all connected and no one is disposable. Why can't we invest in all of us? But for the first decade of caring across generations, these dynamics really kept us from making the kind of progress we needed to make. And then suddenly we found ourselves in a global pandemic. Our children were home from school and daycare. Our parents were on lockdown in nursing homes or isolated thousands of miles away. And millions of us had to make impossible choices about how to manage care in this new work environment. And it became so unbearable that some of us just had to quit. In the span of 2 months between April and May of 2020, 4 million women were pushed out of the workforce due to caregiving challenges. 2 months. As a country, we started to awaken, to collectively realize that this is impossible and it's not our fault. We need shared solutions and public policy. We need an infrastructure for care. Fundamental to that infrastructure is a strong care workforce. Care workers are essential. These are all the awakenings we had in this country, and we still are in the midst of. Life does not pause, no matter the crisis we're in, and the thing that keeps us resilient is care, which is something that people in this state know all too well. Ironically, it was in the midst of the extreme pandemic isolation that we found our voice as a care movement in this country. More and more of us started to share our stories with one another and our elected officials. We launched the Care Can't Wait Coalition and broke down all of the silos in our advocacy. We found that not only do we have more champions than ever before in Congress, but in the White House we have an administration that understands these challenges. President Biden was a single father and a caregiver for his own parents. The Vice President was the lead sponsor when she was in the Senate of the National Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. And she declared a national emergency for women in our economy due to the unique pressures on women and caregivers in our pandemic. For the first time, care became a core priority in the national economic agenda. Not the women's agenda, not the family economic agenda, the economic agenda. And it was holistic the way that it showed up. It wasn't just childcare or just paid leave. It was all of it, including better pay for care workers. And in 2021, we passed a bill through the United States House of Representatives that included historic investments in care. One of them, the proposed investments in Medicaid home and community-based services alone would have represented the largest investment in the creation of good jobs that would directly benefit women and women of color in the history of the country. The bill did not make it through the Senate, but we came incredibly close, much further than anyone ever expected, and we are still building momentum and building power. The silos are gone. The coalition is growing. We are no longer trapped by false choices. Our champions are with us, fighting alongside us. There's not a kitchen table in this country where care isn't a regular topic of discussion. We now have a generational opening to transform care in our country. President Biden declared the month of April Care Worker Recognition Month, and on April 18th, he signed the most sweeping executive order focused on care in the history of the country, with more than 50 directives to almost every federal agency to do everything within its power to expand access to care, to make it more affordable, and to improve care jobs, both child care and long-term care. Many of the rules are historic. First of its kind nursing home staffing rule to address the staffing crisis in nursing homes like the one that my grandfather passed away in. A rule to ensure that when Medicaid reimbursement rates go up, the workers' wages go up too. Just last week, the Department of Labor released a sample contract for domestic workers to recognize that these jobs are equal to all other jobs and deserving of a contract. Social scientist John Powell at UC Berkeley says that there are two kinds of suffering in the world. There's the kind of suffering that's natural, that's an inevitable part of the human experience. There's kind of no way around it. We will all experience grief and loss, heartbreak and disappointment. It's just part of being human. But then there's another kind of suffering that's not natural at all. The kind of suffering that's the result of societal choices and unjust systems that we as societies have created. Systems that have dehumanized us in different ways, that have created hierarchies of human value based on race, gender, ability, immigration status, or class. There is nothing that could take away from the pain of losing my grandfather, who was my companion and my rock throughout my childhood, but the pain of watching him die in an understaffed, underfunded institution was not at all inevitable. Neither he nor the workers who were responsible for his care should have to be dehumanized. That was the result of choices that we made as a society, and we deserve better. There is, for example, no reason why we should have a single child in this country living in poverty. In fact, it's unnatural that we do. We proved that, in fact, when we lifted millions of children out of poverty with the child tax credit in the American Rescue Plan. There is no reason why a single mom in America should not have access to affordable, quality child care. There's no reason why every person in Hawaii shouldn't have the ability to take time off from work to heal after birth or to stay by their parents' side in their final days. These are human-made systems based on choices we made, which is actually good news because it means we can make different choices. And that is what we must do. That is what we will do. New coalitions are forming with business, philanthropy, labor, community groups, everyone coming together. States around the country are saying care can't wait. Washington has launched a new long-term care benefit. New Mexico has passed a ballot initiative to permanently fund childcare in its budget. And Hawaii. Hawaii is a place that has always valued and understood why we must collectively, as a society, support care across generations. Hawaii is currently working to expand access to pre-K and childcare. There is a new proposal for paid family and medical leave coming to the legislature very soon. Next year is a crucial election year, and Hawaii is in a position to help lead the way in making care a national priority in 2024 and beyond. It's time to organize, to share our stories, to help people see the policy solutions that can address the cost of care. This is a moment to demonstrate the incredible power, salience, and broad support these issues have, and to bring us together. This is an issue that touches all of us. Former First Lady Rosalynn Carter once said that there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: people who are caregivers and people who will be, people who need care and people who will need care. The reality is we all provide and rely on care. And at a time when our country feels like it's breaking apart and breaking down, finding the experiences and the values that connect us could not be more urgent and important. There's so much noise in the media today. The way we get media to pay attention to the issues that matter is by inserting our stories and our solutions into the narrative. Voters want change, and voters need care. And a lot of people don't realize that changing policy could really change our lives. Medicare doesn't cover long-term care, but it should, and it absolutely could. People are on waiting lists for home care through Medicaid, and they shouldn't be. These are all policy decisions. We just have to vote for the people who will enact them. Coming together to change the way we support caregiving families has the potential to not only change our lives, but to bring us together as a country in a way that is desperately needed. Langston Hughes once said, "When someone cares for you and cries for you, they can straighten out your soul." What if investing in care is just what we needed to strengthen the soul of the country? No better place to start than right here in Hawaii, and I cannot wait to see the state lead the way. Thank you so much.